What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And today I'm going to talk about Jacob Dominguez, right? Chango from Barrio Grande in San Jose. He was killed 5 years ago today by the San Jose Police Department, particularly Officer Pina. And so I'm going to talk about that. You guys may have seen videos about him before. I don't think you've seen any like this, right? And so we're going to talk about what happened. His family recently won a civil suit against the city of San Jose. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, how they won that suit, how unusual that is. And then also I'm going to try to give you guys a glimpse of who Jacob is, right? Who Jacob was, who he continues to be in the lives of those who know him and love him. Like I said, I feel like I got to know him in this process. And so I want to share that with you. The family's been very generous with their time and their resources. And I'm going to talk about community, who was there and who wasn't, because this idea that everybody steps up is not true, man, and in particular for brown lives, right? And a lot of times, oftentimes in the brown community. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, some takeaways, some lessons I think that all of us can learn and maybe influence the choices that we make moving forward and the ways that we stand for each other moving forward. And so I think there's something for everybody in every section of this spiel. I have the body cam footage. I'm going to show that, but I'm going to give you a heads up before I do. I'm going to start off with a news report and we'll go from there. You guys won't see very much of me in this spiel. It's going to be a lot of pictures and that sort of thing. And there will be no commercials to interrupt it. You probably saw commercials on the way in. You're going to see one at the end. But it's intentional that there's none through the beginning. You know, I don't want to interrupt this. It all kind of goes together. So anyways, help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community and stay tuned.
Ends in deadly gunfire. Now a Bay Area family wants to know, why did police use deadly force? KPIX5's Lynn Ramirez got some answers from the chief today.
Tried to apprehend him other times.
Police Chief Eddie Garcia said 33-year-old Jacob Dominguez, a husband and father of three, was also a gang member who went on a violent 9-day crime spree that ended when an officer shot and killed him.
At some point, we need to make sure that this crime spree ended, and unfortunately ended with the tragic consequence.
Garcia laid out a list of crimes he said Dominguez committed since September 6th, including vehicle theft, a drive-by shooting, 2 car chases, and an armed robbery of a gas station. Each time, police say Dominguez slipped away. Police say a violent crimes enforcement team spotted Dominguez again and made a car stop here at Penitentiary Creek Road and White Road. Police say at first Dominguez was compliant with officers' commands, but later he lowered his hands where they couldn't see them.
The officer felt Dominguez was reaching for a weapon and discharged his weapon at Dominguez, striking him at least one time. Suspect Dominguez was pronounced deceased at the scene.
Garcia said Dominguez was known to have carried a .357 revolver, but on Friday night, he was unarmed.
A search of the suspect's vehicle revealed a knife, drugs, and miscellaneous items. No gun was located in the vehicle.
Members of Dominguez's family stood to the side of the police press conference listening and wiping away tears. Family members said he had entered a Christian men's home and was trying to overcome a drug addiction. A woman who said she was Dominguez's aunt disagreed with police.
Yeah, but I have nothing to say.
What do you think about what you heard just now?
I'm disgusted. I have nothing to say.
The chief says officers were wearing body cameras. Footage is being reviewed, but there are no immediate plans to release the video. It was the 8th officer involved shooting in San Jose so far this year. In San Jose, Len Ramirez, KPIX5.
What I hear in that press conference is San Jose PD basically saying that Jacob got what he had coming to him and the community is safer for it. And that way that they quickly kind of summarized what the family said in response after clearly showing that the family did not really want to respond right then, feeds into that stereotype or that narrative of just another family who's trying to make excuses for their loved one when, quote unquote, everyone, which just really means the cops, know that they're a so-called bad guy, all this other stuff, man. But we're going to get to the truth, you know. The Santa Clara County District Attorney, Jeff Rosen, his office issued a report consistent with the county protocols after an officer used of force. And he lays out what happened before and during the killing of Jacob, right, from the law enforcement DA point of view. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's like 19 pages. There's a link to the PDF in the description of this video, but I will show little sections that I am going to read as we go along. So let's get into this whole 9-day crime spree that allegedly Jacob was on, right? You heard it, the drive-by and the robbery and the car chases and all sort of stuff. So let's back up even a little bit more, right? Crime number one, so to speak, August 28th, 2017, a Honda gets stolen by somebody described as a clean-shaved Hispanic male between the ages of 30 and 35. You're going to see dozens and dozens of pictures of Jacob during this video. And while, yes, sometimes he's shaved, is that really the first thing that comes to mind when you see homeboy? I'm not the telling type, but I imagine if I'm trying to give a description to somebody and get them busted, if I'm close enough to see that they shaved, I should be close enough to see that their whole fake face, head, neck is all blasted as well. And you might want to mention that. So crime number 2, right? August 31st, 2017. That stolen Honda pulls up to a store. This guy, Andrew, this lady, Patricia, they go inside. There's some unknown person in the backseat. Long story short, Andrew allegedly pulls out a silver revolver, grabs a cash register drawer, comes up on $50 apparently, gets in the driver's seat of the stolen Honda, and off they go. Again, nothing to say that Jacob was there, right? Or he was involved. Crime number 3, September 12, 2017. The Auto Task Force is watching Andrew as he's allegedly driving around a stolen Mercedes. Patricia is sitting shotgun, and now Jacob is in the backseat. They stop at this Arco. Jacob goes inside. He pays for gas, right? He pays for water, and he goes and gets back in the car. After that, Andrew puts a mask on, goes inside, and allegedly robs 3 people with a black handgun for a total of like $350. Now, clearly, Jacob had money on him. Jacob was also a 2-striker. The odds that Jacob is in on this, whatever did happen, pretty damn slim. And there's nothing to show that he is. Andrew comes back in the car and they drive off. The Auto Task Force people are like, hey, now things are getting serious. So they tap in with the covert response unit because of the robbery now. And because apparently Andrew is a suspect in a shooting some days prior, a gang-related shooting, quote unquote, some days prior. But the cops lose him. They can't find him. So far we have 3 crimes, and Jacob at best is guilty of maybe joyriding, right? September 13th, the cops learn there's a bunch of people at a house in Morgan Hill, which includes supposedly Andrew, Patricia, and Jacob. They watch the house. They see Andrew and Patricia go to get into a car. They do their little vehicle stop. They get arrested, but Jacob's not there. September 14th, next day, Jacob books a ticket to Dayton, Ohio. The plane is set to leave. It's one way. It's set to leave September 16th out of Oakland. I'm going to explain that. There's actually an explanation there. The morning of September 15th, the covert response unit gets ready to go hunting. And they have a warrant for Jacob now for armed robbery at the Arco. Remember the gas station where he went inside and bought gas and bought water and went back and got in the car. The cops are advised, quote unquote, Dominguez is an active SJG San Jose Grande gang member and believed to be armed with a revolver. The handgun used in the Arco robbery is currently outstanding. Dominguez is aware he is wanted and is believed he is aware of surveillance tactics, and he might be familiar with the cars and everything else, right? So the gun they believe he has is actually a gun that he's never been seen having, Fast forward a little bit, afternoon, September 15th. Somebody uses a fake ID to rent a Kia from the San Jose airport. It's not clear who it is, but it's clear that it's not Jacob. Nobody ever says that it's Jacob. They have surveillance picture, whatever. It's clear it's not him, right? But later on, the police see Jacob driving that Kia. He drives kind of erratically, so the police stop following him by car and rely on air support. It'd be a stretch to say that he got in some kind of high speed or something, because best as we can tell, the cops never made an attempt to pull him over. They were just driving behind him. They didn't try to stop him. They decided to stop following him because they didn't like how he was driving. Later on, air support's like, hey, we found him. They go, they block him in, and within 20 seconds or so, Jacob Dominguez is killed, right? But the police told the world that there was a vehicle theft and a drive-by and 2 car chases and armed robbery, and each time he just barely slipped away and all this other stuff. That's their narrative to the public. That's the way that they're painting Jacob. That's the way that they paint a lot of us, right? But I just read you the literal statement of facts presented by the DA's office, which is what they say is what justified and warranted the way that they responded to Jacob, right? Why they believed he was dangerous. Or that he's a gang member. He has a violent history. Somebody committed a crime with a gun, and we think maybe he has the gun for whatever reason. There's people from his neighborhood supposedly have been busted with big guns in recent history, right? In the last little bit. So maybe that means he has one. It's insane. And so the fact is this: whatever crime spree, quote unquote, that was happening that they're documenting here, if there was one and whatever the details of it are, when they busted Andrew and Patricia, it seems like they kind of put the crime spree to an end right there, you know? And so now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna show you this body cam footage of Jacob Dominguez's last moments. This is not Pina's body cam because Pina didn't turn his body camera on, even though he was running point on the whole operation. He didn't turn it on till after the shoot. But another officer there did turn on theirs, and so you're not going to see Jacob, right? But you're going to hear what happens. It obviously should be disturbing to anybody, man. This is somebody's son and somebody's father and somebody's husband and somebody's brother, or somebody's homeboy. So it's about a minute long. If you want to fast forward to it, I understand, but here we go.
Venga. Your hands there. Hands up! Hands up! Put your hands up! Hands up! Back up. Hang on. Sit! You back! Bobby, you back!
Okay, yeah. That's why it's justice for Jacob, right? Now you can read the details of what each officer said. They had a couple civilian witnesses. They had some cameras from other angles or whatever, right? I'm not going to get into all of that. It's in the report that's linked to. But the gist of it is this, man, and you've seen it. They pit him in that maneuver, so his car's blocked in. His driver's side window is partially down, and they hop out with AR-15s. Tell him to put his hands up. One of the cops, Beanie, is about 10 feet away from him, right in his line of sight. They said that he listened at first and then he started to drop his hands. When he went to drop his hands, they believed he was reaching for a gun because they had been told that he had a gun, even though there's no justification for that. They believed he was reaching for one. And so they shot him. Pina fired twice. The first bullet is the one that hit the window. And because of the hollow point, when it hit the rolled down window, it busted up and part of it went up there and hit him in the neck, landed in the spine and killed him. The second bullet, and I'll get into this a little bit in a second, but the second bullet did not hit Jacob. It did hit the sleeve. It hit his left-hand sleeve. And that's actually something that was very helpful in the civil case in determining that it was excessive force, because if Jacob was leaning down and based on his size and the position of the door and where he was sitting and the angle that the cop was, this stuff is not rocket science. Then how did he get shot through and through, a clean through and through on the sleeve of his shirt underneath his left arm, on the bottom part of his left arm, right? That you only do that if your hand's up, you know what I mean? And so, and that was proven. Nonetheless, so the second bullet didn't hit him. And afterwards they fire a flashbang. Right. And then the cops say, well, we don't know if he's not responding to our commands now to put his hands up and get out. We don't know if he's doing that because he doesn't want to. We don't know if he's not doing that because he can't hear us. So what do? They send the police dog. And what do canines do? Canines bite people that they're sick on, man. And that's exactly what happened here. As Jacob laid most likely already deceased in the car, moments after being shot, like less than 30 seconds after being stopped, there's a dog biting at his neck, and he's pronounced dead on the scene. Inside the car, of course, they don't find a gun because he didn't have a gun. He never had a gun in this situation. They find some drugs, a little bit of personal use dope. They find a backpack with some stuff in it. They find a little folding knife on the seat next to him, not a weapon he was reaching for. It was under a backpack, as a matter of fact. And yeah, the DA basically said that he's not pressing charges because the cops are within their legal right to use that force because they believe that they were at risk, right? That's what they thought. And Jacob didn't listen very well. And Jacob was a gang member with a violent history from a violent barrio. And there's some jail phone call of after Jacob got killed somebody's talking on the phone from jail and talking to someone else, like, oh yeah, man, I heard Jacob shouted out with the cops or whatever, which actually didn't happen. Plus, the call happened after he had died. So, nonetheless, that's why the DA says they're not pressing charges. And the family, through a lot of hard work, man, and a lot of support, a very strategic support, they got this in front of a civil court, and they accused San Jose PD, Officer Pena specifically, of excessive use of force. And the jury said that they're right. The jury said that they're right, and I'm gonna explain why. But quickly, let me remind you, Officer Pena is still employed by the San Jose Police Department. In fact, he's a sergeant now. He was promoted at some point after he killed Jacob. And he's been involved in another excessive force incident since he's been a sergeant. I think it was a couple years ago. At some hotel, there was a noise complaint, and he was overseeing the officers that responded. People wanted to get beat up and all kinds of stuff, and they settled out of court with the city for, I don't know, $500,000 or something like that. And he's still working. He's still working. And so there's a GoFundMe. There's a link to it in the description of the video, and it'll be on all the rest of my social media. There's a GoFundMe because part of this justice for Jacob effort is that dude can't have a job, man. He really needs to be prosecuted. But at minimum, us as taxpayers need to stop paying him to harm folks, right? So the issue with the ballistics, right? DeBug, Silicon Valley DeBug. Right? I have some very good friends that work there, man. Shout out Sharice and Raj and Jose. Like, there's good people over there. And so they were able to help Jacob's family kind of get in touch with different attorneys and extras and whatnot. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. But they got these experts, and they got these use of force experts. Now, the use of force experts that the DA used, that the county used, was actually one of the same ones from Kyle Rittenhouse, the guy that shot people with skateboard during the protest against police brutality that they were having over there, I think, in Wisconsin. So they brought him to San Jose to make some of those same arguments. Unfortunately, it wasn't as successful as it was in Wisconsin. But so Jacob's experts pointed out that bullet hole. They also pointed out that there was no imminent threat at all. Officers never saw a gun. You can't just think that there's a gun or think that there's a weapon and then take such dramatic action based on that. The officers violated all their own policies and procedures. When they had him pitted in like that, where he couldn't go nowhere, they had the numbers, they had the firepower, they had air support. All they had to do was just pull back, have a conversation. There was no rush. There definitely wasn't a need to have this shit resolved in 30 seconds, right? And so they escalated the situation, not Jacob. And they didn't follow their policies and procedures. And they didn't even move around properly. You know, the positions, how they positioned themselves, they put themselves in the line of fire. You know, thankfully, it wasn't an issue on Jacob's end. He wasn't going to shoot nobody. He didn't have a damn gun. But the cops were just reckless through and through. They were on a Rambo mission. They were on some cowboy stuff. And they did what they set out to do, which was end this crime spree by any means necessary, right, according to the chief. So thankfully, these experts came through. They made their point. The jury wound up awarding the family of Jacob about $1 million. And that's nothing. There was actually no punitive damages attached to it, meaning the jury didn't feel that the county or the police should pay a higher bill, so to speak, as an incentive for them to not let things like this happen anymore. It's basically based on the expected wages that they think Jacob would have made in helping to provide for his 3 children through the remainder of his life. And even then, they try to slander him about his parenting and everything else. Man, you guys see the pictures, you know? So yeah, it's something, you know, but it's not, it doesn't take the place of Jacob. No amount of money would. So there's that. Like I said, Officer Pina is still employed there. And Jacob's family is running the risk of seeing him just driving around San Jose, right? And I'll get into more of the police tactics and whatnot here in a minute. But so this next part, what I really want to talk about is who is Jacob Dominguez, right? What's his story? And as I've talked to his family and as I've asked around, some consistent themes that come up, man. And it's an honor, honestly, to be able to share them with you. Homeboy came up rough There's no two ways about it, right? He came up rough. He comes from a family in which there was a lot of self-medicating with drugs and alcohol and street life stuff and everything else. That's familiar to a lot of us. A lot of us can relate to that, you know. But he was always looked after as a kid. You know, his grandmother stepped up when his parents were having issues or challenges. His aunt stepped up. You know, family rallied around. And family and love and respect are kind of the central words for me that come up when when I think about Jacob and when I hear about him and as I try to learn a little bit about him and and share some of him with with you guys. He was into baseball, he was into football, he was into sports. He was a happy kid. And like a lot of young men, around 12 years old, he kind of started pulling away, heading in a little bit different directions. And his mom went and sent him to go stay with his dad, right? And understandably, again, something that happens a lot. And nobody really knew the emotional toll that that had on Jacob until years later when he did that documentary, which I'll talk about. And I'll play a little clip of that here where that's what he's speaking to.
It was just like I held that in for so long, and I didn't know how to act. I just kind of took it out. I went to the streets. I went to the streets and looked for love and felt loved out there. And that's when everything went downhill real fast for me.
So Jacob was always big on respect, not just the macho kind of respect, young men with rising testosterone, but he was kind to people. He was generous. He had empathy. It's the flip side of how he came up. As I mentioned, his family was hit hard by addiction and that sort of thing. But his family also banded together. There was a lot of recovery in his family as well, and a lot of healing, and a lot of helping the community and standing by each other in rough times. His family as a whole knows what it is to be up against it. And that also sends a message. That also gets embedded into a young person as they're growing up. It's not just the hardships, but it's watching the reaction. It's watching the response. And through it all, Jacob was respected and Jacob was loved. So he grew up with respect and he grew up with love. And he grew up expecting that in return, and rightfully so. You can see in his pictures, you can hear it in his voice in the couple of clips I'm going to play. And you can definitely hear it in the voices of people that talk about him. Love and respect was key to him. And so was he like a gentle kumbaya hippie? Right? No, of course not. Let's not get too carried away, right? But it's the neighborhood. That's the nature of the environment, But he was quick to respect people and expected that also in return. And I get the sense that in the grand scheme of things, man, he was an emotional guy. And I can kind of relate to that. And emotions have a tendency to be extreme sometimes in different directions. So yeah, he's out there, he's on the block, he's finding his identity, he's showing love, he's looking for love, he's getting love, right? And both at home and in the streets, but there's some overlap there, right? So he winds up getting in trouble. He goes to the hall, he goes to camp, again, similar story to a lot of you guys listening. And at 19, he catches a case. He goes to the joint for, I think, for 6 or 7 years. That's the same age I was when I went to prison for just a little bit longer. And so a lot of us recognize, man, that going to prison, especially going to prison as a teenager, it takes a toll, right? And so he comes out and he's all tatted back, you know what I mean? And he's trying to figure out where he fits in the world. He's not a bad guy, but a lot of people think he looks like one, you know what I mean? And so then you get all self-conscious, right? And where do I fit? And who am I? And can I make it out here? Right. And I think he was conscious of how people seen him and made that effort to be respectful and to be kind, right? But again, also, expecting that in return. And so he had a hard time getting a job. He had a hard time plugging in. And a family friend who kind of knew his get down and knew his family's get down gave him some work as a glazer. And within a few years, Jacob was a journeyman. He had his own crew, and he's supporting his family. He's got 3 kids that are, under 10, right? His wife is in nursing school. They have a plan. right? There's a roadmap. It's not just a hope now. There's some direction, and they're handling their business. Bumps and challenges and all that shit. Life is life, but in the grand scheme of things, they're doing their thing. But then he gets laid off, right? Work's drying up, economy's not looking good, and so his ego takes a hit, and well, maybe I'll be a stay-at-home dad, that way I could kind of be more support with the kids and spend time with them and the babies and support my wife. Nursing school is a grind, and all that stuff sounds good and the intention is there. I've been in somewhat similar shoes, right? But your identity is shook, man. You're the man, you're supposed to provide. And so, again, what am I good for? Where do I fit? Who am I? Right. And just like our identity can get caught up in the streets, our identity can get caught up in our work and that sort of thing. And it's important. And I can picture him wrestling with those questions, man, because myself, and I know a lot of you guys, if you're being honest, have wrestled with the same ones, and he started to mess up a bit, just flat out, right? He got into self-medicating, he got into kicking it on the block, and the lack of structure, especially you do time, you get a routine, and unstructured time is dangerous, right? And in recovery, unstructured time is dangerous. And so now he has that, right? And he has a lot of it. And Father Boyle, he talks a lot about this lethal absence of hope. And I think that's kind of what started to kick in. That's what it sounds like. And you start to beat yourself up. And so it's kind of up and down, right? And it's a bit of a roller coaster. Nothing too dramatic. He catches a little case in 2013, beats that, right? Charges dropped, it's nothing. And he's back on track. He's in church, which was an important part of him in his healthy space, and so he's back plugged in there. Strong faith community that his family's also tapped into. And shortly before he was killed, he had just left Loving Fathers, which is a residential treatment program, a Christian men's home for recovery. He was doing all right, but he liked to smoke weed, and he can't smoke weed in a recovery house. So he left the program and was kind of blowing in the wind a little bit, right? But again, family had circled around him. There was love there, man. Jacob was not a bad dude, and folks wanted to help him, and they seen him, and they knew him, and knew that he was more than his most difficult day, right? And I get the sense that he was able to see that in other people as well, probably easier than he was able to see it in himself, And so they have him lined up to try to tap into an outpatient program, thinking that might work a little bit better. But then all this BS happens in the few days leading up to his death, and his family knows what time it is, man. He's hot, and so that's where the whole plane ticket thing comes in. And what the cops don't say, right, is Jacob had family in Ohio. A couple years prior, Jacob had gone out to Ohio and he met his grandfather for the first time, his mom's dad. Now, his grandfather had struggled with addiction in the past and was out there doing good. His uncle was out there, his mom's brother. And it's actually his aunt who had helped his uncle to kind of reach the point, some years back of like, hey, you gotta get out of San Jose and it's people's, places, and things, right? That's what they tell you in recovery. You gotta change your people's, places, and things. And so that's what he did. And Jacob had gone out there a couple years before and seen them out there and knew their get down and knew that they had their challenges and respected what was going on. They were working, they had their families, they were handling their business. And Jacob wanted to go out there. He wanted to get away from all the nonsense, and it was like, hey, when his wife graduates nursing school, maybe to, grab the kids and just go out there and then they'll have the capacity to really kind of build. Unfortunately, he was killed before that opportunity became a reality. But when all this stuff goes down, right, and his family ain't dumb. He ain't dumb. They've been around. They know the cops is hot. The whole neighborhood's hot, right? Barrio Grande is under a microscope as it is in general. I stand by everything I said earlier in the video in terms of what Jacob was accused of being a part of officially on paper and what he really was doing, in those situations. And there's rumors and you hear stuff, and I'm not operating in rumors. He's not here to speak for himself. So none of that's relevant. The fact is, man, he At worst, he's running from a warrant on a robbery in which he sat in a car while it happened with stuff that he bought for himself. So his action is good, but he had to get his head right. Had to get his head right, and need to go take a deep breath, man. And that's what the plane ticket was. It wasn't to run from the law per se. It was to level out. It was for him to do some work on himself, and obviously, then yeah, you're gonna have to come back to San Jose, and you're gonna have to deal with what you got coming. But you got a lot better action when when you're in your right mind and you're in a good place. So that was the hope, right? That's what that was. And unfortunately, he was killed by the police hours before that plane was supposed to leave. So that's Jacob, man. That's there's much more that could be said about him, obviously, and I don't know him. I feel like I've gotten to know him a little bit through this process, and it's been humbling and it's been encouraging and it's been sad, and it's brought up memories for myself and loved ones that I've lost, and it's been an experience, man. It's been a journey. I can say this, that Jacob has touched my life, man, and I never even saw him face to face. So the third part of what I wanted to talk about is the community, right? The community. And yes, it's true. DeBug stepped up big time for Jacob's family, right? And helping to navigate this stuff. And unfortunately, they're familiar with it because it happens, right? Pastor Fred Romero stepped up, for the family in major ways. But he has for decades, right? And again, this is a deeply rooted family in San Jose, and the attorney, John Crowley, he stepped up and did what probably a lot of people didn't think was possible. What I can tell you is he did what a lot of people weren't even willing to try to do. And that's a little bit of what I want to get to, man. The family contacted John Burris. Name might be familiar. I'll put a picture of him up. Black dude, lawyer from the Bay Area. I believe he handled the Oscar Grant case at the BART station when he was killed in New Year's. He's a high profile attorney, and he talks a lot about use of force cases. He's a civil rights attorney. I know him. I've spoken on panels with him, and I'm pretty disgusted when I found out that while he sent an investigator at first to go take pictures of Jacob's body, that's what helped the family realize that a dog had chewed on their loved one, which is just unfathomable. He said he can't take the case, man, because Jacob's a gang member. And first of all, I challenge all these people to get in a room and come up to some agreed upon idea of what a gang member, quote unquote, even is. But like, really, it, there was other attorneys that the family got at that said no, and some of them folks look more like Jacob, right? And yet they said no. And I'm not trying to make this aspect a race thing. I'm sure that there are black and brown attorneys that would have taken this case, and that there are white attorneys who wouldn't have come anywhere close to it. So not so much about race as it is the demonizing of people, man, the criminalizing of culture, right? The buying into the police narrative, which is rarely accurate, and then us as a community losing as a result. We're getting harmed by our own, you know, and there's a lot of other people who love Jacob, loved his family, were helped by his family, right, in various ways. Who, when this happened, was like, oh yeah, man, love y'all. Hope it goes well for you. Sorry, I can't be more helpful, right? Why? Because it's too political. Because challenging the police, challenging city leaders, challenging the county. Well, when your money comes through their hands, it's not good for your budget, for your little nonprofit, or for your little drug program, or for your little ministry, right? You don't want to ruffle the feathers of the gatekeepers, the ones that put you on these little BS boards and give you these little fake titles that make you feel important in the community. No, let's not piss them off, right? It's too political. It's too edgy, right? And God forbid that you lose money that isn't even really yours defending a family and people who are yours. I've never lost a child to violence, let alone police violence, thankfully. I've had a lot of people in my life killed. I've had the blessing and the stress of walking alongside families when they've been in these situations. And one thing you always hear and you see, you know what? The little whispers in the corner where people don't have the nerve to come talk to you to your face, but you know they're talking about you. And they're hoping that when you come in the room that you don't get all radical. And they're hoping that you don't bring that up. And you're hoping that you don't suck all the air out of the room for this, right? Oh no, don't make them uncomfortable. Don't make them uncomfortable. Can't have that. And a lot of times, man, it's people that look just like us. And people whose bank accounts are just like ours. And people who live on the same streets and in the same apartments and their kids go to the same schools. You know? It's not just the outside world judging the neighborhood, man. The hood judges itself and sometimes a hell of a lot more harshly. And we gotta stop. We gotta stop. If got nobody but ourselves, right? And the judgment, the assumptions, oh, I thought they were such a good family. What happened? Oh, yeah, well, wonder what's going on over there, right? Like just the cheese, man, the nonsense, man. It it further divides and further divides. And that stuff actually plays a role in how people get caught up in the neighborhood type stuff sometimes, anyways. Get caught up in some of the more criminal elements, some of the more violent elements. You know, I'm all about being proud of where you're from. Stand on that. You know, there should be no shame in that. Doesn't mean you got to get violent with people that are from a different place, you know, but this respectability politics, this idea of we all have to conform, you know, to what makes others around us comfortable, you know? And I'll get on that more in a minute, but we got to break that down within our own communities. We really do. And and I'm thankful and I see a lot and I've heard a lot and a lot of people have said, you know, hey, the community came out for Jacob and part of the community did. And praise God for that. Part of the community absolutely did. But let's be honest, once it was a fraction. It was a fraction. And it shouldn't have only been Raza that came out. And I'm not saying that it was, but I just mean it's not like, oh, all the Raza should have been out there. That would have been great. All of everybody should have been out there. All of everybody should have been out there. Unless you think it's okay for a police department to kill somebody within 20 seconds because they think maybe they got a gun because they seen them around somebody who had a gun once and that person's in jail. Come on, man. Let me tell you a little bit more about how the police treated Jacob's family. And those of us that have lost loved ones to street violence have seen this a ton. They got at Jubilee to see if they would host Jacob's service, what used to be Jubilee, right? Huge ministry in San Jose. And they said, yeah, you know, you can use the main sanctuary. And then here come the cops and here come the other voices and they're calling the church. You can't do that. It's going to be a big old NF junta. It's going to be a gang thing. He was a gang member. Gang, 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 right? To the point that the church is now getting spooked. Oh, man, maybe we can't do this. We're kind of ruffling some feathers, you know. And thankfully, thanks to Pastor Romero and others, right? They still did it. They still did it. And then afterwards, there's that condescending, wow, it's the most beautiful service I've seen. Wow, it went so well. Wow, man, shut up. Just stop. Like we're all just a bunch of animals and savages? Wow, I'm so impressed you guys were able to come and mourn your loved one without killing everybody. Get the fuck out of here. Save that. We come from the same place. We're from the same soil, right? Act like people are lepers or foreign objects or some subgroup of human over here because they wear clothes that match. They got some ink on them. They melted up some chest pieces and stuck it in their skin. Come on, man. They caused some cases. They got in a little bit of trouble. You know, they've self-medicated. They've been traumatized. And now there's some foreign creature. And we're just so impressed when they can put one foot in front of another. Come on. Cut it out. Of course, Jacob's family respected that space. Of course, they were on their P's and Q's. Of course, they were mindful. Of course, they were mourning. Of course, they were hurt. Of course, all the stuff that you would expect and then some. And you know, if people did act out, who could blame them? But they did it. The police took surveillance pictures of Jacob's wife crying at his grave. They had surveillance set up for his grave. They followed around the family. They harassed the family. They harassed people that were connected to the family. they never dealt directly with the family. You know, to this day, it's been 5 years. To this day, the police in the city hasn't got at them about their loved one that they killed, right? The family found out from the streets, man, from the block, from the neighborhood, that 4 a.m. phone call that nobody ever wants to get, and a lot of us have gotten or been in the room when it's come in, of a loved one down. And then panic. Oh my God, can it be true? Okay, we gotta let people know it's not true. Call the coroner. Coroner, hey, you know, Jacob's a pretty easy dude to describe. The coroner's like, oh yeah, that's him. There's your confirmation that your son or your husband or your brother, your loved one is dead. That's it. Still no cops to the door. Still no nothing. No explanation. Cops say you can't have a body for a couple of weeks, man. We're investigating. We can't tell you it's under investigation. All this surveillance, everything else, like there's some gang war going on. Like the rivals are gonna come through and spray up the funeral. The rivals are the ones in plain clothes running around taking pictures of people like some weirdos. But those rivals are there to protect and serve. Yeah. Tell me how that works again. This was not a gang, this wasn't street violence. This was a government sanctioned hit. This is a state sponsored murder. And then the state is running around harassing the victims. And so when you say, I don't want to get involved, it's too political. When you say, well, what's the other side of the story? Well, what's the details? Well, that's not my business. There's no neutrality in death. None. So when you turn a blind eye, when you pass that judgment, when you give that side eye, when you're like, oh, I'm praying for you. And really what you're doing is praying that they don't come around and put you on blast. No, then that's what you're supporting. You're supporting police officers that behave that way. You're supporting city leadership that behaves that way. You're supporting leaderships of ministries and programs and organizations that think that way. And if they think that way, then how are they going to deal with your loved one who's still alive and comes looking for help? Come on now. We have got to do better, and we have to do better for ourselves. We have to hold each other more accountable. Just because you're from the neighborhood I'm from, or just because you look like me, or just because we got some stuff in common, or just because we work in the same place or whatever, that don't mean we're on the same team, you know? And just because you don't, doesn't mean that we're enemies. We got to build these coalitions. We have to get like-minded folks together. So yeah, community showed up, thank God. Family showed up. Love showed up. Respect showed up. But there should have been more. There should have been more. And there wasn't. And this will happen again, unfortunately. You know? So take some lessons. And lastly, speaking of lessons, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm gonna wrap up this video. It's been a little bit longer than I thought already. First thing, man, get you a Rosie, right? And let me explain. So Rosie is Jacob's aunt, right? Rosie is Jacob's mom's sister. She was very generous with her time on the phone with me. She's been a strong advocate. Now, in a lot of these pictures, man, you also see Jacob's mom out there advocating and Jacob's wife. You know, this was not a replacement thing. But what I mean by get you a Rosie is when this happened, everybody's crushed, of course, right? And you don't quite know the next steps, man. It could be hard to figure out how you're going to get out of bed, you know? It's a struggle to figure out where your next breath is going to come from. And these situations hit different folks differently for a variety of reasons, and ain't none of it wrong, you know? And when that happens, it's a real blessing if you have somebody, a trusted person, who is like, hey, you know what? I'm not stepping on toes. I'm willing to do the will of us and carve out this path and kind of keep this ball rolling, or at least figure out where to start pushing it to roll. And you do what you gotta do. And as you get stronger, as you get able, as you get settled, whatever it may be, then yeah, this is all you. So it you need somebody, you know, families are they share blessings, they share burdens, right? That's what family does. Whether it's a family you're born into or it's a family that you're making. And that's what it seems like Jacob's family does and has done in this situation and will continue to do. We all need that. We all need that, right? We got different roles, and it's not competitive, and it's not egos, and it's not this, not it's just trying to get justice for Jacob. And so I would encourage you, all of us really, even and for myself included, right? That when tragedy strikes, just see where you fit in, see where you could be of help, and be flexible and be fluid with that. Fighting the stigma, the stigma of being from the barrio, really, right? We gotta fight against that. Like Jacob, Jacob and Chango are not two different people. The same person, right? Whatever you call them, it's and that person is worth decency, whether you know the Chango side or the Jacob side, right? Is worth decency. Is a person of dignity. Is worth respect. And in this case, you know that you would get the same, right? I'm not obligated. Jacob wasn't obligated. You're not obligated. Nobody is obligated to live in a way or dress in a way or talk in a way or whatever that makes other people comfortable, right? If I'm not harming you and not harming your feelings, like actually harming you, if I'm not harming you physically and I'm not taking your stuff, then the fact that I make you uncomfortable is your problem. It's not mine. Fuck your comfort. Don't come around me then, right? That doesn't give you a right to kill me. It doesn't give you a right to call the police on me because I'm making you uncomfortable. My presence makes you uncomfortable. Okay, then get a therapist. That's not on me. And yet we can be pushed into thinking like, oh, I have to live in such a way or carry myself in such a way or strip important parts of me away so that I could be acceptable and palatable to other folks that don't even necessarily have my best interests at heart, don't even necessarily care about me. They care about themselves and their own comfort level. And my presence makes them uncomfortable. What I've come up from under makes them uncomfortable. What I've survived makes them uncomfortable. What I wrestle with makes them uncomfortable. That's on them. Stop making that about being on us. You know what I mean? Another quick point. Every neighborhood has them, man. These little ragtag nonprofits, right? And you see these youngsters, and it always looks like they're stirring up something, right? And fight and sign this and this bill and protest that, and they got the little signs out there, and they're at city council meetings, and most of us don't even know what a city council meeting is or when it is, and they're just agitators and they're shit starters, and they're really passionate about stuff that a lot of us really don't pay attention to or really don't necessarily understand. Find those folks in your community, man, and figure out what they're up to. Which doesn't mean you gotta jump on the bandwagon, but it, they might save your life. They might make they might save your life. They may change your life. Speaking of DeBug and Sharice and them, Sharice cut her chops, so to speak, in East Palo Alto, working for an organization out there, YUCA, Youth United for Community Action. A bunch of young people banded together to force the federal government to clean up a toxic waste dump in East Palo Alto, in the back of the gardens. That was kids that did that. That read these technical papers and met with the federal government and all kinds, just amazing things, man. There's a movie in that movement, and it kept a lot of kids off the block, and it kept them busy, and it gave them a sense of power, and it taught them about community, and it taught them about the power of community, right, and civic action and engagement. And there's little groups like that all over this country and all over the Bay Area. And DeBug has that same spirit and that same fight. And they're a little bit bigger. They got the thing going on, but they're grimy in how they work. And that's what's necessary. They are the community. And we got to stop dismissing them. You don't have to stay in tune with everything, but at least kind of figure out how can you support. And if there's nothing like that in your neighborhood, look at the neighborhood next door, figure out who's doing it over there, and see how it might happen in your backyard. It's a great place for young people to be instead of on the street corner. Not everybody's comfortable playing sports. Not everybody wants to be a rapper. There's a lot of ways to be a homie. There's a lot of ways to help others move in excellence, and that's one of them. So don't forget about them. And there's little ministries and there's little nonprofits and that kind of stuff too. I'm not putting down any one group or the other, but I will say a lot of times it's not the people that are very well polished and have the expert PowerPoint presentation and everything else. It takes a budget to do all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the times the ones really in the fight ain't really making anything because they're in the fight. So support these local community organizations, the real ones, And again, DeBug is linked to in the description. And if you're anywhere in the world, but in particular, if you're in the Bay Area and South County area, tap in with them. That's it, man. I can go on for a long time, but I'm gonna end this with Jacob's words from this documentary, Making a Gangster, that he did with family and friends before he passed. And there's another lesson in there, man. He was hesitant to do it. Felt a little hypocritical. Right? How am I gonna have this conversation? But I'm still smoking and I have a drink and I want to have all my stuff together. If you're waiting to be perfect to have an impact on your community, man, it ain't never gonna happen. It's we need to accept each other, warts and all, so to speak, right? But he did do it, and I'm thankful that he did it. I've seen little bits and pieces of it. I don't know when it's gonna get released to the public, to some kind of licensing stuff or whatever. I don't know. It's not my thing, but again, just watch him and hear his words and tell me again that there's any reason that all of us should not be fighting for justice for Jacob. And that fight continues, man. And I hope that you will participate in it. I want to thank the Jacob Dominguez's family. I want to thank all his homeboys and loved ones of Chango from Barrio Grande. Thank you, Rosie. And thank you guys for giving me this opportunity. It's been a real blessing to me. And the world will know Jacob's name because of you guys. And I honor that and respect that, and I'm here to help advance that in any way I can. So help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. There's a variety of content on this channel, man. If you haven't been around here, take a look around. It's all kinds of stuff. And yeah, siempre adelante.
It was just weird growing up because everybody's trying to figure out what to do in life, and I was pretty much lost when I was young. I was younger, I was growing up. I wasn't lost, but at the same time, I was just trying to find something, like to accept me, and I didn't know what to look for. I really, I was just young. I didn't know. I was just out there. I wanted to feel love. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be with, do something. And